I'm live. Calix Boxing. Calix Boxing 2.0 here on YouTube. Calix Boxing 2 on Twitter. CalixBoxing.com. The website is live. Go check it out. Appreciate all the support on Twitter. Gaining more followers by the day and gaining more subscribers by the day here on YouTube. So thanks to all the new subscribers and thanks to everyone that's been checking out the show on archives, as the archive views have been great. So appreciate all that support. And we've got ourselves a great fight weekend. This is a weekend for the hardcores. Last weekend was a weekend for the casuals. You had a fake championship fight, a fake trinket fight behind a paywall, a pay-per-view paywall. The beautiful thing about this weekend is you got 4 fights set up that are set up for the hardcore fans. But at the same time, they should be entertaining fights. They should bring entertainment value. And on top of that, none of them are behind the pay-per-view paywall. You're not having to spend $75 in order to check out the fight. And there's a lot going on in boxing news as well. That's what I was bringing up yesterday. This is a great time to be a boxing fan. On top of all the great fights that we already have in this action-packed schedule, on top of all the great fights that we've had so far, on top of the fights that are scheduled for this weekend and the upcoming month or two, we're getting more fights announced. We're getting more fights signed. We're getting more fights on the horizon. And that's beautiful for boxing. It just sets up for a great, great schedule looking forward. And I mean, some of the fights to look forward to is, Virgil Ortiz and Ryan Garcia are both announcing fights. And that's a beautiful thing to see. It's good to see guys who are action fighters, guys who have demand from fans. Their fans want to see them. They got a nice built-in fan base. They want to see them fight. They're going to be back in action. It's good to see Virgil Ortiz back. And let's start off with that. Virgil Ortiz versus David Avenation. Beautiful. It's beautiful. I mentioned earlier, if you look at the landscape in the welterweight rankings, it's tough to see, and shout out to my guy, Nando, and always dropping those gems on Twitter. Check out his Twitter. But it was tough to see the fights that are going to be made in the top 10 besides Crawford and Spence at the top 2. Ugas is going to likely take a break at number 3. But 4 through 10, how are these fights going to get made? And if you look at the rankings, Virgil Ortiz is somewhere around 5 and David Avenation is 10. And you have 2 guys who are hot right now in the top 10 in a loaded division with talent, a lot of young talent coming up. If you look at the rankings, you got Spence, you got Crawford, you got Ugas, you got Boots, you got Keith Thurman in the rankings, you got Virgil Ortiz, you got Connor Ben Stanionis, Cody Crowley, and David Avenation. So you got 2 guys in the top 10 looking to mix it up here. I didn't think that Virgil Ortiz was going to go this route, and I'm happy he is. Avenation, I believe he's won, 6 straight fights? 6 straight fights after his loss. Shout out JC in the building as well. And y'all make sure to like as y'all come in. But I think he's won 6 straight fights since the loss to Kambosos, and that's a common opponent, right? Kambosos just lost to Virgil Ortiz, so a common opponent there, but Avenation is looking to keep this going. He's been on that Euro tour. He's been mowing guys down. So this is going to be a big step up for him. This is a fight that's a step up for Virgil Ortiz to see how he looks against the top 10 welterweight. Because Avenation is a legit top 10 welterweight. How he's going to look against a guy who's on fire right now, who has it going. I want to see how Virgil Ortiz bounces back from his illness. There were questions as to how long is he going to stay at 147? Can he still make 147? Is he going to move up to 154? Is the move to 154 imminent? All right. Is Virgil going to stay at 147? Is Boots Ennis going to stay at 147? Is this division going to stay hot? And where are we going to find these top 10 matchups when you have a bunch of guys in the top 10 at welterweight who are at the same point in their career coming up? So who are they going to clout chase off of? If there's nobody to clout chase off of, if Keith Thurman and Danny Garcia don't want to step in the ring with them, they're going to have to eventually fight each other. So you have 2 guys now in the top 10. Props to Virgil Ortiz. Props to Golden Boy once again for making a fight. And Golden Boy is signing some fights right now. They're making fights official. Vergil Ortiz, Ryan Garcia. We'll talk about that in a minute. Props to Golden Boy for keeping this going. And I love this fight. I love this fight. It's one of those fights where we're going to find something out, right? We're going to find out where Vergil Ortiz is in his career, because Avenation is not an easy fighter to deal with. He's just not. So if Vergil Ortiz mows him down, if he walks through him, then we start to get rid of some of those question marks of will he be weight drained at 147? Are his days at 147 numbered? Was he a bit overhyped? We can start pushing those question marks aside, because at that point we can start to say Vergil Ortiz is the real deal. A good win at 147, a top 10 win. So that's what it's going to give us. Virgil's trainer had questions about his defense. I don't know who did Virgil end up going with. I don't know. Somebody in the chat's going to have to fact check that, and I'll do my research after the show on who Virgil's with right now. Donaire versus Inoue 2. Donaire round 8 KO. And I put let me check that chat. I put in the chat, we got 7 votes so far. What do you think, not the best fight, what do you think will be the most entertaining fight of the weekend? And that's why I love about this weekend. And right now, Kambosos versus Haney is in the lead. And I tend to agree with that. But I think all of them are going to be entertaining. That's the fun thing about this weekend, is it's a boxing fans weekend, in that it's giving us meaningful fights that we want as boxing fans. It's giving us we had demand as boxing fans as to what fights we wanted to see. This weekend is giving us that. On top of that, it's one of those weekends where you can enjoy it as a boxing fan, but if you want to invite a casual over to watch these fights, it should be entertaining fights as well. It should be fun fights. When I look at Kambosos versus Haney, I could see it playing out one of many different ways. I don't really get a handle on that fight. It's close to toss-up odds. I don't know what to think about Haney going over to Australia without his 2 top trainers. I don't know what to think about the judges in Australia, given recent history. A lot of question marks in that fight. Will Kambosos be able to fight the same way he fought in the Teofimo fight? Will there be a letdown there? Will Haney's, what we saw of Haney against Linares at the end of the fight pop back up? And it didn't against Jojo Diaz, because Jojo Diaz isn't a puncher. So Haney had a good 2021, but there are still some question marks that haven't been answered as to what happened at the end of that Linares fight. So will Kambosos be able to test that out? Will he be able to test that out? Which fight is going to be a bloodbath? I think Ortiz training with Ruiz, old trainer. I forgot his name. Okay, so me and Nando were talking about this earlier. Nando seems to think that Donaire may be the upset special, and I disagree. And let's just go with that. Let's just go off into this fight. I tend to think, and I've said this many times, as someone who follows the lower weight classes as much as I follow the upper weight classes, it's hard to be a guy pushing 40. It's hard to be a guy up there in age and have success in the lower weight classes, which is why it's impressive as to what Donaire is doing late in his career. Donaire is a guy who was written off. Already had a Hall of Fame career. Is having sort of a second Hall of Fame career within one career. But he had success early in his career. Hall of Famer already, should be already, just off of what he did early in his career. But then he was written off. And then he fights Donaire, a fight in which many people wrote him off and said, he just doesn't have a shot in this fight. The monster is going to pick him apart, destroy him. That didn't happen. We had a bloodbath of a fight. We had a fight of the year candidate type of fight that surprised a lot of people. And then being that happened, you still said Donaire took a lot of punishment in that fight. He's still up there in age. He was like 37 at that point. So I think that fight is going to end him. And then he comes back in his next fight after being off a little while and defeats Ubali by, I think, 4th round knockout. Vicious knockout to win a legit title at 118. And you're not supposed to do that And some people who may not follow the lower weight classes say, oh, who cares, Ubali? Ubali can fight, and he was a legit title holder. You're not supposed to do that at 39 years old, 38 years old in the lower weight classes. So now he's 39, pushing 40. He won another fight, and he's leveraged himself into a unification fight at 118. He's leveraged himself into a rematch. There's now public demand for this rematch, given what Donaire has done since that fight and given what Donaire did in the first fight. There's now public demand for that fight. And on top of the public demand in the fight, there's entertainment value because you say, what happens if Donaire comes out fast against Inoue and fights the way he did in that first fight and it turns into another bloodbath? And then on top of that, there's public demand for it. We all wanted to see, there's implications. It's a unification fight. Not only that, when we talk about undisputed at 118, this is the toughest leg of that undisputed fight for both of these guys. The winner of this fight, if given the opportunity at 118, will become undisputed. In my view anyway, and I think in most people's view. So whoever wins this fight is going to be the guy at 118. And where I differ with my guy Nando is when I play this fight out in my head, I can't see a guy even as special as Donaire. And what Donaire has done is special because it's sort of like the Washington Wizards, Michael Jordan, right? He's not the greatest fighter. He's not the greatest player in the world anymore. However, he's still an all-star. Michael Jordan's run with the Wizards was underrated. He was still an all-star. He was still a top 15, 20 player in the league at an old age. Jordan, 96 through 98, he can't dunk on guys anymore as easily, so he develops the fadeaway. Donaire has a similar thing going on to where he's not going to blow guys away anymore, so he became a two-handed fighter. He became more technical. And that's impressive about Donaire and his late run in the lower weight classes. It's not easy doing this in the lower weight class. It's a lot more difficult than the upper weight classes because the activity rate is so much higher from these fighters. These younger fighters are throwing a lot of punches per round. They're firecrackers down there. So it's difficult to deal with if you're an aging fighter who doesn't have the reflexes, doesn't have that same aerobic ability that you did earlier on in your career. It's just a tougher thing to deal with. So I have the utmost respect for Donaire and what he's done. I've become a fan over his career. However, I think the monster has his number here. I'll give my official prediction later in the week, but I think that Donaire is going to have a lot of trouble in the middle rounds in this fight. I think the cream is going to rise to the top. I think the age is going to start to show against a young monster. What's impressive about Inoue, and why when people ask you why you have Inoue so high on your rankings, pound for pound, it's because he encapsulates a full fighter. Like, he'll give you what the lower weight classes tend to give you. He can be an all-action fighter. He can throw with a lot of output. He can give you technique as well. But the same thing with the upper weight classes. He's a guy who can end a fight with one punch. One punch. And that's why people were so drawn to Naseem Hamed. One of the reasons why, because you knew the fight could end with one punch. You knew that despite the criticisms we had of Naseem Hamed that showed up against Barrera, you knew the fight could end in one punch. He had that one punch power that you can get in the upper weight classes. Inoue gives you that as well. He can stop you with attrition. He can stop you with one punch. And I just tend to think that Donaire is going to walk into something in the middle rounds and this fight's going to be over. As far as what I think is the most entertaining fight of the weekend, and let me get to some of these comments. It might be Manny Robles. You're right. It might be Manny Robles. Virgil sparring Castano. I'm going with Kambosos, Inoue, Fulton, and Ogawa. And real quick on Ogawa, Cordina, because a lot of people may not know this fight. Ogawa is the number 3 guy at 130. Shakur Stevenson showed separation between him and the other number 2 guy in the number 2 guy in the division, Oscar Valdez. So head to head, Shakur showed that there was a clear separation between him and Valdez, but there's a separation between Valdez right now and the rest of the division at 130. Valdez is still the clear number 2 guy. So the implications of this fight is there's a strap on the line, so the winner can leverage themselves into a possible fight with Shakur Stevenson later on, a unification fight, or they can avoid him because a lot of guys will be avoiding Shakur Stevenson, I'm sure. But um, you know, it will give us a better idea of who's number three. Ogawa's number three right now. So if he wins this fight, it sort of cements him at number three. But Cordina is a guy who's up and coming. He's a younger fighter, fresher fighter, undefeated, fighting in his hometown. He's a versatile fighter, and he could give Ogawa some issues in this fight, and that's why he's the favorite. I think they have priced in that he's the hometown favorite. He'll likely get some favoritism with the judges, possibly being the more active fighter, but Ogawa can get him out of there too. And if I'm Ogawa, I think that would be the game plan to try to get Cordina out of there. That way you don't have to deal with the hometown judges. So that's another good fight this weekend that has implications. But as far as what's the best action fight of the weekend, I just tend to think, like, I keep going back and forth because Fulton versus Roman is an intriguing fight to me as well, as far as action. I'll never forget Nonito wrecking another monster at the time, Vic Darchinyan. I remember that as well. I do think, though, Nonito, Inoue is a different beast. And Vic was a beast, too. Yeah, but I just think Nonito's special, man. I mean, Inoue is special. And I think he's going to try to make his claim for top fighter pound for pound. I think that's what's going to happen here. Let me see. I see a super chat from my guy Nando, and I appreciate this, Nando, as always. Mayweather level, excellent content. I appreciate it. Appreciate that. Trying to bring more consistent content to everybody, daily content, as well as on Twitter and on calixboxing.com. So check out calixboxing.com. You'll see a lot of content on there, as that is my first love, writing. So Inoue's orbital bone was destroyed. Yes, it was. So we'll see that too. We'll see if Donaire can test that. And Nando may be right. This may be an upset special. If I'm looking for an upset this weekend, as far as the odds, Roman is an interesting one because Roman is around the same price, the same as Donaire versus Inoue. He's right around 400 plus 400 plus 450, and Roman can fight. And Roman, his loss isn't a bad loss. Like, it's not a bad loss. So, like, when I watch this, when I see this fight play out, I see it playing out much like I saw Fulton versus Figueroa play out, right? To where Roman is going to try to pick up the pace, right? He's going to try to put pressure on Fulton. He's going to try to slow Fulton down. He's going to try to go to the body, try to isolate Fulton and slow down his legs, slow down that lateral movement, and try to turn this more into a firefight. The thing about that is, I saw Fulton have success against Figueroa, even though Figueroa threw over 1,000 punches in the fight. Fulton still threw over 60 punches per round. Fulton landed at a higher percentage, so the shots that he was throwing, he made count. And he showed excellent boxing ability, which he always does. The guy's an excellent masterclass boxer. And the implications here is obviously for two belts. Obviously, the winner, it just looks to me like Fulton and Akhmadaliev are on a collision course, that they're the two best fighters in the division. But Figueroa right now is number 3, and Roman is number 4. And these guys are mixing it up with each other. And Roman wants another shot at Akhmadaliev. Like, there's no shame in losing to Akhmadaliev. I know only 10 fights, but high percentage, KO percentage. The guy has tested himself, and I think he's going to beat Ronnie Rios later on in the month. And he's a hell of a fighter. Like, Akhmadaliev is a beast. And that's the thing that Roman has going for him, that even though Akhmadaliev has that much punching power, even though Akhmadaliev was landing huge shots on Roman in that fight, rocking him with huge shots, Roman was still throwing at a high output himself. That didn't slow him down. He was throwing over 60 punches per round in that fight, even against a bigger puncher who was returning a lot of counters against him. So I just don't see much slowing down Roman as far as output. I think Roman is going to follow Fulton. He's going to try to cut off the ring as much as possible, but I think he's going to do more following and he's going to walk into shots, but I think he's going to continue to walk through those shots. And I want to see what Fulton does later on in the fight, much like against Figueroa. And I think it's lining up to be another close decision fight. And it's going to depend on whether the judges lean more on accuracy or on activity, the guy trying to make the fight, the guy more active. So it's an interesting dynamic here, and I think it leads to another entertaining fight. So I go back and forth as to which fight I think is going to be the most entertaining this weekend. Which fight is going to be the best fight as far as action? I go back and forth between Fulton and Roman, and then this fight that I'm going to talk about now, Kambosos versus Haney. Donaire will have an intimidating factor versus Inoue. Donaire broke Inoue's orbital bone, and Inoue was never the same. We're going to see. We're going to get a better idea of this. And Inoue didn't fight great competition in 2021. Wasn't very active in 2020. So you're right. He's been on a little bit of a down trajectory, but I just think that talent is undeniable. And I think Donaire is going to walk into something big in the middle rounds of this fight. Inoue is still putting Coolios in the dirt. He is. I wish they were able to do Nonito Inoue too, like Haney versus Cambosos, afternoon time, prime time here, star making fight. I agree. And people are asking why it's in Japan. The reason is money. It's a super fight over there, much like Murata versus Triple G was a super fight over there. And I wish more fighters would explore going to other continents to fight where the fights make sense. You see Haney doing that against Kambosos. Huge fight in Australia. Much bigger over there than it would be if it was here. Same thing with Inoue versus Donaire. I know people want to continue to have Inoue in front of an American audience to try to build him as a star here, but why do that when the money is over in Japan and Nonito Donaire is willing to go over there? I'd love to see more American fighters go to the UK and fight. If Deontay Wilder were to come back, and let's say Anthony Joshua, no matter what he does against Usyk, win or lose, you can still fight Anthony Joshua at Wembley Stadium in front of 90,000 fans. That fight's not as big here. So I would like to see more fighters, and I think that's why Canelo is exploring fighting John Ryder in the UK, because he knows he can build this global brand. He can go where the fights make sense. He can fight in America. He can fight in Mexico City. He can fight in the UK. He can fight in Japan. He can fight in Australia. He can go on a world tour like a boy band. I wish more fighters would explore that. And I know what it is. They're not comfortable with judging and other. And look, it's understandable. You see the recent history in Australia. Manny Pacquiao goes over there. I felt he beat Jeff Horn by 3 points, but he loses a decision. It happens. It happens. So I understand the reluctance. I just wish more fighters would explore this, because I think they could build a global brand and get ahead of other fighters who just want to stay within their territory, within their tribe. Why not build a bigger tribe? I don't know. Donaire beat 2 champions on his last 2 fights. Inoue beats nobodies on his last 2 fights. Look, when that bell rings, we're going to find out. All that stuff goes out the window, and we're going to see. I like Donaire. I'm a fan. I'm also a fan of Inoue. So this is a no-lose for me. I just want to see a great fight. When I see this fight play out stylistically, it's tough for me to envision. And this speaks to the greatness of Donaire that he's even in this position. But it's tough for me to envision a near 40-year-old guy beating the top guy in a lower weight class. It's just tough to envision, man. Like, it's what's impressive about what Chocolatito is doing, right? What Chocolatito is doing at 115, that he's still competitive, that he's about to go into a trilogy fight with Gallo Estrada, that he's still beating top guys in the weight class after being in war, after war, after war, after war, after being sent to hell by Sor Ronvice. It's impressive. I got the utmost respect for these guys. Like, I don't understand why they're not bigger names within the boxing world. I understand why casuals may not want to see horse jockeys fight, but within the boxing world, I don't understand why these guys aren't getting more pub, and why they aren't getting more credit on pound for pound rankings. I'd like to see more lower weight class guys on pound for pound rankings, because if you look at under 130, 135, half of the weight classes are under those weight classes. So why are only 20 to 25% of your pound for pound list? Why are only 20, 25% of fighters in those weight classes being represented in pound for pound lists? I think that's a big flaw that people aren't talking about. I think people are just giving guys extra brownie points for name recognition in their brand, other than just looking at a full resume and looking at the fighter. Donaire will give an everlasting damage this time to Inoue. He is now using his everlast gloves. Man, a lot of respect for Donaire here. A lot of respect. If I could bet in Cali, I'd play some money on Donaire. He's been on heater lately. Yeah. And where Donaire was using a different type of glove this coming June, Donaire will use his everlast gloves, his knockout goodnight gloves. A lot of respect. Chicano Prophet in the building. Go check him out on YouTube as well. That's my guy. If Donaire beats Inoue, Donaire should be automatic number one pound for pound. A lot of respect for Donaire right now. For folks that have the zone, check out yesterday's boxing show. Nonito sounds peaceful and confident. Not necessarily for political reasons. I hate watching those fights from Saudi Arabia. Atmosphere stinks. Usyk, AJ2 going there. I hate that too. And that's what I'm saying, like where they're not going to have the fanfare, where they don't make sense, right? It's like putting two American fighters over in an Indian resort, like in Montana or something, just because the site fee is the highest. But it would make more sense. I remember sitting second row for Andre Berto versus Luis Collazo in Biloxi, Mississippi. And I was happy that the fight landed in Biloxi, Mississippi. I was happy that I was able to sit second row. I was sitting next to Jadon Codrington. I was sitting, Roy Jones was about 5 rows over on the other side. And I was sitting right behind Lou DiBella. Great seats. And I was happy. But at the same time, I was thinking to myself, like, we're sitting in a ballroom that fits about 500 people. And it's not even completely full. And I'm thinking to myself, like, this fight would have made sense somewhere else, more sense somewhere else. Why is it here? Why isn't this fight in Brooklyn? Why isn't this fight in South Florida, where Andre Berto's from? And that's what promoters seem to do, just take the highest site fee. And that's what they're doing when they land this fight in Saudi Arabia. I'm sure there's a lot of oil money that they threw at Eddie Hearn, but I just wanted to see this fight at Wembley. Why not do it in front of 90, 95,000? I think over time, short term, you take the short term money, the oil money, and put it in Saudi Arabia. But I think over time, it would make more sense if you put it and continue to keep Anthony Joshua in front of his crazy fan base. Put it in Wembley. I don't know. I'm not a promoter. I'm just thinking of this from a boxing fan standpoint. But as far as Kambosos versus Haney, this fight is going to heat up as well. And the reason I don't get a good feel of this is there are a lot of question marks. There's a lot of question marks still that haven't been answered as to what happened with Haney at the end of the Linares fight. Are we reading too much into that? Is Haney's chin better than people give it credit for? Does Haney have more power than people are giving him credit for? Does he have the power to keep Kambosos honest for 12 rounds in a frenzied atmosphere where Cambosos is going to be trying to take his head off and this fight's going to be fought at a high output, high activity. I think Cambosos is going to make sure of that. And I think Haney knows that he's going to have to throw a lot of jabs. He's going to have to be active in order to keep Cambosos where he wants him as far as the real estate battle. So where it starts to get intriguing is what happens from like the round 7 on. Will we start to see Haney start to wear down a little bit? Will we see Haney start to wilter in front of the Australian audience? Will we see Kambosos in his chest, making Haney fight at a pace that Haney may not be comfortable with? Will Haney have the power, enough power to keep Kambosos honest? And then once those question marks start to come and Haney starts to overthink things, will Yoel Judah be enough? Or will he be looking for his dad's voice? Will he be looking for Ben Davidson's voice? So at what point do we reach that level where Haney, who seems calm and collective right now, he seems very confident, calm, but will we reach that point in the fight where he starts to question things and then looks for a familiar voice in the corner? Something Donaire may have the divine intervention edge. Donaire had to use Inoue's backup gloves in the first fight that came out yesterday too on DAZN. Spring 2022 is stacked in boxing. Love it. Shout out Wheelchair Man John. Boxing is on fire. I think Haney is talented boxing-wise. He is. Talented boxer, great pure boxer, looks the part. And I'll say it again, this is what I respect about both fighters. Cambosos could have came off of the Teofimo win, where he went into Teofimo's backyard and took the belts from him. He could have went back to Australia and said, I'm going to take a light touch or two in front of a big audience. I can sell out against anybody. I can sell out against anybody right now. I'm going to do that. But he wanted the Lomachenko fight. That fight fell through for obvious reasons in the Ukraine. But he comes right back off of that and says, well, give me the undisputed fight versus Devin Haney. Full credit. That's how a fighter behaves. That's how a champion behaves. And the same thing for Devin Haney. Devin Haney agreed to go over to Australia, then agreed to, even if he wins, he defends all 4 belts that he now owns against the guy he just beat. And oh, by the way, I'm going to do it in his home country again. Full credit. Full credit. And you think about the implications here for Devin Haney in particular is if he is to somehow go through this contract right now that he's currently in, I think it's a 2, maybe a 3-fight contract. But if he goes through that undisputed at that point, you're all of a sudden looking at a 24-year-old young American fighter, good head on his shoulders, who seems promotable, seems marketable. He's now the undisputed champion at 135, and he's a promotional free agent. Whew. Think about the power and leverage that comes with that. That's what's on the line for Devin Haney. A lot on the line for Kambosos as well. And this is what I'm talking about as far as this weekend. And go over to calixboxing.com to check out the article I wrote. There's a lot of implications. You have 4 fights. With the 4 fights, you have a combined 10 legitimate belts on the line. 10 legitimate belts. With Fulton versus Roman, you got 2 belts. With Kambosos versus Haney, you got 4 belts. All 4 belts. With Ogawa versus Cordina, you got 1 belt. And then with Inoue versus Donaire 2, you got 3 belts. A lot on the line. A lot on the line in the division. And this is what happens when the top fighters fight the top fighters, is implications. And you got the landscape. The landscape, no matter what happens, the landscape's going to change at 118. It's going to change at 122. It's going to change at 130. It's going to change at 135 after these fights. The landscape, how people think about these divisions, that's how much is on the line this weekend. Phenomenal. It's phenomenal. Kambosos better put a lot of body work in early. Too much head hunting will play into Haney's hands. And Kambosos is an underrated trash talker, but at the same time, is he starting to talk too much? Will he go in overconfident? Like Nando says, will he go in head hunting? Will he go in undisciplined? Will he go in not thinking enough about Haney? Will he leave his chin out in the air? Will he not stick to a game plan? Will Australia, him fighting in his home country in front of a packed crowd, hype him up too much? So you got to read into that as well. It's just, I don't get a good feel for this fight. I don't know how it's going to play out. I'm not ashamed to say that. Inoue versus Donaire too, I have a pretty good feeling of how it's going to play out. As I said, I have a pretty good feeling as to how Fulton versus Roman is going to play out. I think it's going to be much like Fulton versus Figueroa, and I think Fulton will find a way to edge it out against a tough Roman. A tough Roman who has only lost to Akhmadaliev as of recent. And then you got Ogawa versus Cordina. But this one is the toughest one for me to figure out of all of them. Pulverize with respect to Haney for going to Australia. I hope we will not get another Pac Jeff Horn BS judging. I agree. I didn't agree with that judging. I thought that Pacquiao got robbed. I think the Kambosos Haney fight is going to be a 7-5 round fight. Whatever way it goes, some Haney fans are saying Cambosos is going to get destroyed. I don't see that happening. And one thing I don't want to see is excuses either. Because he's going out there. He agreed to this fight knowing that his father and Ben Davidson were going to have trouble getting visas. So I don't want to see any of those excuses. He's got Yoel Judah in his corner. He still had his 2 top trainers training him up until a couple weeks ago. So if the judging is good in this fight, I don't want to see any excuses, right? This is what we all agreed to. This is what we all signed a contract for. And they say boxing is dead. And it is not. It is on fire. The contrast between Cambo or Haney versus Tank is stark. Big ones and no pay-per-view. Tank and Mayweather just cherry picking. And that's what I wrote earlier on Twitter and in the article is this is legit championship fight. Forget the fake propaganda that you heard from Showtime last weekend. Showtime was misleading people as to Tank is a multi-division champion. Tank is a champion defending against a tough Rolly Romero. It was a fake belt. It was a JV belt. It was a Reggie belt. It's a belt that shouldn't exist. The real belts, the only belts that matter at 135 are held by Kambosos and Haney, and the only real belts that matter at 135 are on the line this Saturday in Australia. And the only belts that matter at 135 will end up in the trophy case of either Kambosos or Haney after this fight, given that it's not a draw. And whoever wins this fight will be seen as the champion at 135. The champion at 135. There is no other. After this Saturday, barring a draw, there is one champion at 135. Nobody else. Nobody else is a champion at 135. This is what undisputed means. Nobody else has a claim to a championship at 135. When we have an undisputed champion at 135, it's undisputed. It's beyond dispute. It is undisputable. There is no other champion. I want people to understand that. Forget the fake propaganda out there being thrown around by people like Steven Espinoza, being thrown around by company guys at Showtime, calling the Tank Davis versus Rolly Romero fight. That was not a championship fight. It was a trinket fight. It was a cute little belt. That was a fight for a cute little belt, but it wasn't a championship fight. The only championship fight at 135 is being held Saturday, and the only champion at 135 will be the guy who wins this fight, barring a draw. Is putting down a few bucks on Cambosos good value or for your buck? Because I'm going to drop a few on Cambosos depending on the odds fight day. It's tough for me to read. That's why I'm waiting for the props. I was talking to somebody about this earlier. There's going to be some value in prop bets. Over-unders, round by round. You can bet, do you think the fight's going to be stopped 1 through 6? Do you think it's going 7 through 12? Do you think it's going to go the distance? Wait for all of those. They have not dropped on my app yet, so I can't speak on it. That's why I wait till Thursdays, because that's usually when they drop to give my betting advice. And I'll be here tomorrow night. Actually, Power Punchers will be back tomorrow night. And I'll probably do a separate video as well on betting odds, because I think there's going to be value in the prop bets this weekend. The best value that I see as far as money line right now is possibly Roman against Fulton, because I just think he's undervalued. I'm not saying he's going to win the fight. I just think there's going to be a close fight that goes to the scorecards. And when that happens, you never know what's going to happen. So I just think he's undervalued at plus 400, plus 450 right now. So if you're looking at value, that's the best value right now. And if you like Ogawa to beat Cordina, there's value in that as well, because Ogawa is actually the third rated fighter at 130, and he's the underdog against Cordina. And I know why that is, but it seems like a trap. That's why I'm staying short of telling you to bet Ogawa, because it seems like a trap to me. So I'm waiting for what happens with the prop bets. I'm waiting for those over-unders, because I think there may be a parlay in play, if I'm reading this right, as far as overs this weekend, because I think Fulton versus Roman goes over. I think Kambosos versus Haney goes over. I think both of those fights are going to the judges. Chauncey, most of the big heavyweight fights, 10 million plus illegal streams. Let's see what we got. Shout out GOAT Mario P. Is Cambosos better than Jojo Diaz? I don't think so. I see 10-2, 11-1 type for Haney. Wow. That's a lot of respect for Haney going on the road. If Kambosos pulls this off, he better be on people's pound-for-pound list. That is right. This is a pound-for-pound implication fight here as well. Whoever is undisputed, like if you become undisputed, you're on the pound-for-pound list. Jermel's on the pound-for-pound list. I think I have him at number 5 after becoming undisputed. So the winner of Kambosos, Haney, when they become undisputed, they automatically go into the top 10 pound-for-pound on my list anyway. Where you have them, I don't know where you have them. But Haney goes over to Australia, clips off all the belts from Kambosos. He's top 10 pound for pound. Cambosos beats Teofimo, then Haney. Both, if you look at Vegas odds, upsets for him. He's all of a sudden top 10 pound for pound as well. Pound for pound implications here. No doubt about it. Whoever wins this fight is on the pound for pound list. Yoel Judah going to be throwing a lot of punches in the corner. Yeah, Haney's got to watch out in the corner too. If team undisputed, I'm team undisputed in every weight class, as am I. And we're starting to see more talk. This is more talk than ever about undisputed the past year. And I dropped the article last year about this that I just put. I didn't have a website at the time. I just put it on YouTube community page that 2021 and 2022 are going to be the years of unifications. They're going to be years of undisputed. And I think Canelo led in that. I think when Canelo made that run at 168 for undisputed, more guys were looking at that and saying, I want to follow that blueprint. A lot comes with undisputed. A lot comes with that claim. And this is the 4 belts, the 4 sanctioning bodies following that blueprint. When they work together, boxing is better off because of it. I'm not necessarily against the 4-belt system. There's a good claim for it as far as you need 4 sanctioning bodies to give guys shots who aren't getting shots at mandatories. You need fighters who aren't getting shots to be high in the rankings to where they can get a mandatory shot. So I'm not necessarily against the 4-belt system. I'm against the 4-belt system when it doesn't work. But when it works, like right now, it's a beautiful thing. They're a necessary evil, but they're working to our benefit right now in boxing. And that's why boxing is hotter than ever. It's not a coincidence that we're seeing more unifications and more undisputeds than ever in the 4-belt era. We're seeing more guys go for undisputed. And, oh, by the way, boxing is hot right now. And, oh, by the way, we're getting great fights. That's not an accident. They're using the sanctioning bodies. They're using the 4-belt system to make the top fights, make better fights. And we're getting better fights. Top fighting the top, best fighting the best. And it's a beautiful thing. Speaking of Jojo Diaz was 5'6" and giving up 8 inches in reach and was able to close with Haney and put hands on him. Cambosos is faster than Jojo and only giving up 3 inches in reach. And that's fair. Jojo doesn't have punching power either. So Haney didn't really respect Jojo Diaz's punching power. And that was a good fight to put Haney in after the Linares fight and what happened late in that fight when he was touched up a little bit by Linares, putting him in there with the top 10 guy, a legit top 10 guy in Jojo Diaz. That's a good win. But a guy who wasn't going to test his chin because Jojo Diaz wasn't a puncher at 130. He certainly wasn't going to be a puncher at 135. But speaking of Jojo Diaz, I wanted to see Ryan Garcia versus Jojo Diaz. It's a Golden Boy fight. I felt they could have kept the money in-house, and that was a huge fight in L.A. Instead, we're getting Ryan Garcia against the guy Jojo Diaz beat, which Ryan Garcia versus Javier Fortuna is a mixed bag for me. I like the fight. I think it's going to be a great fight in LA. Great fight in LA, and it belongs there. And it's good to see Ryan start to get back on the right track, right? Ryan, yes, he was a big favorite in his last fight, but at least we got him back active after the mental health break, right? So now he's bouncing back off of that and stepping up to fight Javier Fortuna. So the trajectory is right? We're starting to get him in better fights. So if you let Ryan Garcia tell it, he wants to beat Javier Fortuna in LA, and it's not an easy ask. This isn't a fight that you just put Ryan Garcia past, right? Because Fortuna can upset the apple cart here. It's a tricky fight. However, Ryan Garcia is talking about fighting Fortuna in July, which would be a big fight in LA. Ryan Garcia is a huge draw in LA. And then he wants to fight Tank Davis in December. Whether that happens or not, I have my doubts, obviously. But Tank Davis versus Ryan Garcia, despite what we think about both fighters or either fighter, is one of the biggest fights that can be made in boxing. Both guys are huge attractions. So it looks like a build-up to that, hopefully. And I hope we get that fight in 2023. I have my doubts, seriously, if we get that fight in December 2022, but I think we'll get that fight eventually, hopefully, in 2023. Hopefully. Because it's a fight we need to see. But I would have rather see Ryan Garcia against Jojo Diaz. Possibly Golden Boy is saying, we're going to do Ryan Garcia versus Javier Fortuna, which is a tough fight. If he gets past that fight in July, later on this year, realistically, we do Ryan Garcia versus Jojo Diaz in LA in December-ish, in a huge fight in LA. Both LA-based guys, both have a huge, Ryan Garcia has a huge fan base built in, and Jojo Diaz has a fan base as well over on the West Coast. So I think that's probably the play here if I'm looking out, to do Fortuna first and then Jojo Diaz later in the year. I think that's what Golden Boy's thinking here. But we'll see. We'll see. Too bad for all the so-called fans who have no idea about the 112 to 117 divisions in their world-class fighters. They're missing out, man, because a lot going on in the lower weight class. Off top of your poster in the back is missing the fifth king, Wilfredo Benitez. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I feel Kambosos versus Haney is a 50-50 fight. Inoue over Donaire, 60-40. A firefight, Fulton over Roman, 55-45. And this is what you want to see in boxing, right? More fights that are in between 60-40, right? We're tired of seeing 80-20, 90-10. If you look at the betting odds, like they gave Lemieux like a 7% chance of beating Benavidez. They gave Rolly like a 12% chance, 11% chance of beating Tank. We want to see more fights that fall within the 50-50 to 60-40 range. I would get more casuals interested if there was an undisputed in every weight class that it would. And I would add, if they made it more sustainable, more realistic for undisputed fighters to be able to keep the belts long term. If they would work with each other in order for the undisputed champion to stay undisputed champion, to where they wouldn't be paying, as Josh Taylor said, he paid 11% of his fight purse towards sanctioning fees for defending all four belts. It's just unsustainable. And when we start to talk about mandatories and having to defend against a guy within a 12-month range, 18-month range, it becomes difficult to keep all those straps. So we have to build a system in which is more sustainable for the undisputed champion to defend all four belts going forward. Ryan said he wants Tank in December. I don't believe that. We'll see who would have won Finito Lopez versus Carbajal at 108. Finito Lopez. And on that note, I'm out, man. I got to get back to it. God bless everybody. I'll be on here tomorrow night, Power Punchers, 9 p.m. Central. Me and D-Style will be back, and we'll be talking about everything in the boxing world, and we'll be back with boxing trivia as well. Visit calixboxing.com. Have a happy Wednesday.